Dun, 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 dun. Welcome to the big show, ladies and gentlemen. It's the What's on Sports podcast. My name is John Tenor, and I'll be your host today. We're broadcasting to you live on Facebook and on YouTube. And for some of you, you're downloading this show and listening to it on your favorite podcast networks. Thousands of people listen to this show every day that we do it. And throughout the week, we get thousands and thousands of listeners. We'd like to thank you all for supporting the show and making it the success that it's become. We'd also like to thank our sponsor. For those of you that really want to learn about sports trading, which is like gambling on steroids, man, go over to sportstradingsystems.com where they can teach you how to trade sports just like other people trade stocks. Today we have a huge show. It's we're going to talk about Devontae Smith, who just won the Heisman. I thought he gave a great acceptance speech. We're going to cover the NFL stat leaders. You know, the season's over, so we're going to do a whole recap. We're going to cover NFL stat leaders, who led in what categories. We're going to do our own What's on Sports awards. We'll tell you who we think is the MVP of the league, offensive player of the league, offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, etc. Then we're going to play a little game called First Reaction, where we dive into the playoffs and we give you a first reaction of every game. We've got our mailbag. You guys wrote in your questions. We're going to answer all the questions for you. And we're going to do a lot of other really good stuff. I do want to remind you that we have a website out there, which is whatsonsports.com. You guys are going to love it. Go over and check it out. We've got some great articles and some amazing content that is constantly being shared over there. Go over and check out whatsonsports.com today so you can see all the good stuff. Now, before we start, I do want to say a couple breaking news items that popped up today. First of all, Chan Gailey resigned as Dolphins offensive coordinator. I thought he was going to retire. There were rumors that were going to let him go, but Chan Gailey is no longer with the Dolphins. What does this mean? It means, unfortunately, as much as I don't think they thought that he was able to get the best out of Tua as a quarterback, unfortunately, this means that Tua is going to have a brand new Tua Tagovailoa, whatever the hell his name is. I just say Tua. Tua is going to have a brand new offensive coordinator, which is really one of those things that I hate for a young quarterback. I hate when young quarterbacks are constantly put through the ringer of having a new coordinator year after year after year. You end up with Alex Smith, who now we can see is really, when healthy, one of those elite quarterbacks. What he did in Kansas City was great. What he did his first year in Washington is good. What he's doing now in this amazing comeback is phenomenal. You can see the talent that Alex Smith has. But in his first few years in San Francisco, he was constantly being brought in through different systems that never stuck around and stayed with him. So because of that, Alex Smith was never allowed to grow as a quarterback. And I think you'll probably see the same thing happen with Tua. What you can hope for is that whoever replaces Chan Gailey comes in and uses the same language and just changes some things up a little bit so that Tua doesn't have to learn a brand new language all over again. Chances are they probably won't do that. They might bring in somebody brand new, which means that Tua and the rest of the team will be learning the offense from scratch. That's never a good thing for a young quarterback, in my opinion. I don't think it's a good thing for any quarterback, but it's definitely not a good thing for a young quarterback. Also, more breaking news coming in. Trevor Lawrence is going pro. He made his decision today. As if we thought he would stay. I didn't think so. He's going pro, which means that he is saying, Jacksonville, draft me. I'm fine going there. What does Trevor Lawrence mean to Jacksonville? He means a lot. That is the one thing that if you listen to the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars talking this week, the one thing he said is the one thing that we've been missing all this time throughout the storied history of this franchise is we've been missing a franchise quarterback. Now, Mark Brunell would have something to say about that because at one time he was an elite quarterback who played for them, but they've never had a Trevor Lawrence. They've never had a number one overall quarterback pick go in there and be the man. This guy is being compared to Andrew Luck. They're saying he's got the same kind of tools. He can run the ball. He can, not super fast, but he can definitely run the ball. He obviously knows how to lead receivers. He's an elite level intellect as a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence goes into the NFL draft. We'll be talking about the NFL draft today and a lot of other stuff. But the first thing I want to do, if you're watching at home, you can see that we have a list of things we're going to be talking about. I want to make sure that we congratulate Devontae Smith, whose name is misspelled on this, but on the thing that you see in front of you. But Devontae Smith gave what I thought was one of the best Heisman speeches I've heard in a while. If you've never heard Devontae speak, he was very eloquent, very classy. Devontae Smith winning the Heisman.
Dad, just everything that y'all taught me to mold me into the young man I am today. I want to thank my mentor, Vincent Sanders. Without you, I wouldn't be where I am today. Just from the rise to taking me places that I want to visit, just to doing things and just helping me get to where I am. I want to thank Coach Saban for giving me the opportunity to come play at the University of Alabama. Thank Coach Wiggins, my receiver coach, just for helping me day in and day out, watching film, making me a better player.
Now, if you listen to this kid talk, I'm listening to this kid talk, and I'm hearing a humble leader. I mean, just the tone of his voice, a little Southern drawl to him, but he just, to me, he sounds like a smart kid. He sounds like the kind of kid you want to draft. I'm watching this guy, and I'm thinking they got this guy as the third or fourth best wide receiver in the NFL draft coming up here. If he interviews like this, and this is a big part of being drafted, if he interviews like this is going to be the first guy to come off the board as a wide receiver.
With team success comes individual success. So without y'all, I wouldn't be where I am today, winning this award. And just to all the young kids out there that's not the biggest, not the strongest, just keep pushing, because I'm not the biggest. I've been doubted a lot just because of my size. And really, it just comes down to you put your mind to it, you can do it. No job is too big. If you put your mind to it, you can do it, and just keep believing in God, and you'll get where you want to be.
Love it, love it. So, a lot of people said Devontae Smith wasn't big enough to be the elite receiver that he is. I think he only weighs about 175 pounds, which is a little small. But, I mean, if you watch the kid play, again, going back to the same thing, you can have all the tools that you want. You can be the athlete that you want to be. But the guys that are really elite in the NFL, the guys that are really elite in the NBA, the guys that are really elite in almost all major sports have what it takes above the shoulders. And I'm talking about the head for the game. And not everybody has that. But it's amazing that Devontae was able to not only display that, but also be able to talk about it. By the way, if you see the comments coming on the bottom of the screen, anybody who's watching the show at home live can jump in there. Jack Sparrow says, well-deserved. Devontae Smith is the new Heisman Trophy winner for 2021-2020 season. So let's jump along here, guys, and let's talk about some interesting stuff. One of the reasons that I always fell in love with sports, for me, was that sports to me wasn't just about the players. It was about the stories, and the stories that were intertwined, not only in the drama of what was happening on the field, but the numbers that came along with it. So going back to my younger days, I was such a statistical nerd. Like, I used to sit outside during baseball season, and this is, I don't want anybody to laugh, but this is how old I am. I would listen to the game on the radio, and I would have a score sheet. I would have a book where I could listen to all the games, and I could write down what was happening in the game. So if somebody hit a single, a double, a triple, you would just keep track of everybody. And then at the end of the year, I would compile my own stats, and I would compare them to the stats that I would find in the newspaper to see how close I was. And I realized that's incredibly nerdy. But again, I was a sports nerd, and I still think I am. So things like this, I always find to be incredibly entertaining to me. So I'm going to go through a list right now of who the league leaders were and things that they did. And we'll compare the story that we heard all year long compared to what the reality of it is. So, for example, the league leader in passing touchdowns this year. Now, the league leader in passing touchdowns in the first 5 weeks was Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was on a pace to score 60 touchdowns. This guy was on fire, in fuego. Well, Russell obviously ran into some problems along the way. He did finish with 40 touchdowns, which is still a very, very impressive year. But it didn't match his beginning part of the year. Tom Brady, a lot of people thought Tom Brady was washed up midseason. You would hear people say, is it time for Tom Brady to retire? Did he make a mistake going to Tampa Bay? Well, Tom Brady actually also threw for 40 touchdowns, and that's impressive. So the guy that a lot of people were talking about, saying that he's a shoo-in for MVP, and I've disagreed along the way, Patrick Mahomes. Now, I'm not, again, I think I need to explain this to people. I'm not tearing down Patrick Mahomes as a talent. He is obviously an incredibly talented NFL quarterback who's unstoppable in moments. But Patrick Mahomes only, and I use that word loosely here, Patrick Mahomes only had 38 touchdowns this year. So Patrick Mahomes wasn't even in the top 3 guys. So who was number 1? Well, the man that I've been saying should be MVP, who's probably had the quietest 48 touchdown season of all time. We're talking about Mr. Aaron Rodgers of the Packers. 48 touchdowns, led the NFL. And by the way, as a side note, Josh Allen had 37 touchdowns, which is super, super impressive. Let's talk about yardage. So if it wasn't for Patrick Mahomes actually sitting out the last game of the year, he would have led the league in yardage, for sure. He finishes with 4,740 yards, a lot of yards. Tom Brady was right behind him, 4,633 yards. So again, you're looking at Tom Brady and you're saying, this guy's washed up. Well, he's second in the league in touchdowns, third in the league in yards thrown for. I mean, a great season by Tom Brady, but number one on the list for quarterbacks who threw for the most yardage, Watson from Texas. Deshaun Watson, 4,823 yards. Impressive indeed. Now, this is one of those stats that to me is mind-blowing. Back in the 70s, even the 80s, if a quarterback would complete 60% of his passes, people were like, wow, this is amazing. 60% of his passes is so amazing. Well, this year, we had not one, not two, but three quarterbacks play an entire season and all pass for over 70% completion. 70% completion. And two other guys were very close. Teddy Bridgewater was 69%, 69.1. Josh Allen for the Bills, 69.2%. We had three guys at 70% of their passes. That means 7 out of every 10 passes they throw were completed. We're talking about Deshaun Watson at 70.2%. Drew Brees, 70.5%. And again, the man who I said is MVP, Aaron Rodgers, 70.7% of his passes completed. Absolutely amazing. You think in a game right now that is so focused on throwing the ball, that the running backs are probably, no one's got a lot of yards, right? Well, you'd be kind of right. In years past, I've seen a lot bigger numbers from a lot more guys. But the guys who were successful were extremely successful. Number one was obviously Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry broke the 2,000-yard mark. He's one of only 8 players to ever do it in the entire history of the NFL. Now, years ago, that was something that almost seemed untouchable. Eric Dickerson actually has the record, and I believe it's 2,120 yards. I read a report over the weekend saying that Mr. Dickerson was actually afraid that the Texans game was going to go into overtime, the Texans-Titans game, and that Derrick Henry was going to get a shot at actually breaking his record. So he was sweating it out a little bit. Derrick Henry, number one, at 2,027 yards. Number two, a guy who had another fantastic year, Cook from the Minnesota, 1,557 yards. That's a great year. There's a huge fall off after that, though. Now, Jonathan Taylor had the best year of any rookie running back. He had 1,169 yards. But to put that in perspective, Taylor finished his year with over 200 yards in the last game. So if it wasn't for the last game of just an amazing wrap up to a season, Taylor wouldn't have hit that 1,000-yard mark. Aaron Jones had 1,100 yards. David Montgomery had 1,000 yards. And James Robinson, who's another rookie, also had 1,000 yards. Only 6 players had over 1,000 yards this year, which is very rare for an NFL season. But that's kind of because we throw the ball so much now, but it's also because of the running back by committee thing that you see. Scoring touchdowns by running backs, just running the ball into the end zone. Derrick Henry led the way with 17 touchdowns. Cook, 16. Alvin Kamara with 16. Putting that in perspective, though, Kamara had 6 in one game. So without that huge game, he still would have had 10. Nick Chubb had 12. Cam Newton had 12, showing some value on the ground. Too bad he can't throw the ball. And Josh Jacobs, he of the most recent DUI story, also had 12. Receiving yards. I've said all year long that I don't think that there are alpha receivers anymore. There are some, but not too many. So you're not seeing guys that are having these huge, enormous years that we saw in years past. But there are a few. Number one, Stephon Diggs goes to the Buffalo Bills, and what people were calling like a weird draft day trade. Diggs scores gets 1,535 yards. I mean, absolutely impressive. That's a huge year for Diggs. Diggs actually was traded, and the Vikings drafted Jefferson. Jefferson actually got 1,400 yards. So when you look at that as an even for even trade, the Vikings trade Diggs away. They get a first round draft pick. I think they get a first and a third. They end up getting Jefferson with that first round pick. They pay a lot less. Diggs is happy in Buffalo. Jefferson and the Minnesota are happy together. That's pretty much a trade 1-for-1. Number 2 on the list, though, and I've never seen this before. Number 2 on the list of receiving yards for the year was, we have a girl who works for us, a woman who works for us named Lovely, and Lovely happens to love Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce was number 2. So if Stephon Diggs doesn't have that huge last game that he had, which, he only played a half of football, but it's an amazing last game. Travis Kelce would have led the league in receiving yards as a tight end. That's amazing. Also on the list worth mentioning, DeAndre Hopkins, 1,407 yards, Devontae Adams with 1,375 yards, and Calvin Ridley with 1,374 yards. Amazing. Let's talk about actual receptions. Stephon Diggs again, 127 receptions. I mean, he was targeted over 175 times this year. That is a phenomenal number. Closest guy to him was Hopkins in Arizona with 115. Then you got Adams with 115, Darren Waller with 107, Travis Kelce with 105. So out of the top 5 receivers in receptions this year, 2 were tight ends. You're seeing a lot of trends. Pay attention to them for next year when you're drafting your fantasy teams. Touchdowns this year. Number 1 with a bullet. It was the third most touchdowns by a receiver in NFL history, coming behind Randy Moss, who had 23 one year, and Jerry Rice, who had 22 one year. Devontae Adams had 18 touchdowns this year. He missed 2 games and a half of another game. That's how good Devontae Adams was this year. Absolutely lethal. Total yards from scrimmage. Derrick Henry, of course, 2,141 yards. Derrick Henry had like 120 yards receiving all year long. That's incredible to me that they don't get the ball in his hands in the open space. That's just amazing. Let's talk about sacks. Let's talk about my guy in Pittsburgh. I don't actually remember a time when any Pittsburgh Steeler has led the league in sacks, but it happened this year. TJ Watt, 15 total sacks this year. Behind him, Aaron Donald with 13.5, and a couple of other guys with 13, 12. Not a lot of sacks this year for how much they throw the ball. Not a lot of individual sacks. So it wasn't a huge year for sack masters this year. TJ Watt definitely made himself some money. And by the way, for the first time in history, the Pittsburgh Steelers led the league in sacks for the 4 years in a row. This year, they led the league with 56 sacks. Last thing we'll talk about is interceptions. And this is a guy who didn't get a lot of talk, actually. Xavier Howard led the NFL with 10 interceptions. I mean, that's amazing. Double-digit interceptions for the first time since anybody's had that since 2007. I mean, that's a player. And that was why I was so high on the Dolphins and why I was so disappointed in their very last game. That secondary was really, really good. C.J. Jackson came up short of what Xavier had, but he still had 9. That's just incredible. I don't even know who J.C. Jackson is. I said his name wrong the first time. Unbelievable, actually. So those are the stats for the year. And when you see those stats, you start to think to yourself, wow, just what exactly do those stats really mean? Well, they mean a lot of things. First of all, that it's props to everybody who was able to have these amazing stats. It probably got you to the Pro Bowl. It might make you an all-pro. All of these things can trigger some things in certain people's contracts so they can make more money. It also gives people leverage later on when they go to negotiate their contract. Imagine going to work every day and saying to your boss, hey, I can actually show you with numbers how much value I have to your company. Well, that's what these guys can do when it's time to renegotiate those contracts. So those are all interesting things. Also, it puts a lot of people in a position to be able to say that I'm due for some type of award. Well, speaking of awards, I've got a guy coming to join me on the show right now. He is one of our head writers over at whatsonsports.com. Lance Fernandez is in the house coming to join us. Lance, how are you today, buddy? Good to see you. Awesome. I can't hear you at all. Isn't that amazing? All right, well, we're going to fix Lance's audio problem. It was working just there. He is.
Sorry about that
That's
slight
okay.
problem. Yeah. Hope you're
That's
doing
all right,
well,
buddy.
God. Yeah.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, doing well. Yeah, enjoying the new haircut. It's the second day that I had this haircut, so really rocking it, I guess.
Yeah, dude. I think it looks great. To be honest,
Thank you.
you look faster. Like it looks like you've cut down the wind resistance so you can move faster in the air. You know,
Like Camara fast like that.
almost like Kamara
Almost.
fast, but Kamara's got long hair. So, well, listen,
Yeah.
I brought you on things. We're going to talk about a couple things. You wrote a great article yesterday. You were in charge of our What's on Sports NFL awards, and you gave awards out to everybody that you thought should actually win these awards this year. Now, these aren't obviously the official awards, but this is our version of them. So I couldn't wait to bring you on the show today and talk about it. Let's break it down, buddy. Let's break it down. Where do you want to start? You want to start on the defensive side of the ball, offensive side of the ball? What do you want to do?
Let's start with the comeback player of the year. I guess it's the easiest choice of them all.
Okay.
So this is a no-brainer. It's Alex Smith of the Washington football team. Drama, check. Life story, check. And then outcome, bigger check. Imagine he almost had a chance of not playing football, let alone walk after 17 surgeries and that life-threatening infection in his leg.
He actually almost died from what the reports say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So from that life-threatening situation to playoffs, that spells comeback player of the year through and through for Alex Smith.
That's amazing. You know, I look at the list of people on the comeback player of the year award list. To me, Alex Smith is without a shadow of a doubt the guy. I was against it earlier in the year because a lot of people were saying he should get comeback player of the year just for showing up. And football's never been about participation trophies, so I was against it. But seeing the difference that he was able to create in that team, seeing the difference that he was able. Somebody's making fun of you in the chat room a little bit. Seeing the difference he was able to make in that team. The Redskins are 4 and they're 6-9 overall. I think 7-9 overall, but they are 4-1 with Alex Smith as the starter. So it's a completely different team with Alex Smith as the starter. I'm a little disappointed though when people talked about comeback player of the year that Ben Roethlisberger wasn't mentioned at all. I thought that he at least should be mentioned. I don't think he should win the award, but national media doesn't really like Ben that much. So I was a little disappointed he wasn't mentioned though. I love your choice though. I agree with it wholeheartedly. What are we doing next? You want to go defense or offense?
Yeah, let's go defense. Right. Okay,
so let's start go ahead.
So since we've named Alex Smith as comeback player of the year, I firmly believe that his teammate Chase Young is the defensive rookie of the year. So he backs up his swagger. So as we all know, he just called Tom Brady before their wild card matchup. So he issued an ultimatum, a threat to the 43-year-old quarterback, but he tends to back it up all season. So check this number: 7.5 sacks, 42 tackles, and 3 fumble recoveries. And guess what? He could be the heir apparent to Ryan Kerrigan in that front line and the D of the WFT.
Yeah, listen, I don't think he's the heir apparent. I think he's the guy right now. When you watch him play, I've always been a fan of Kerrigan. Kerrigan's a work hard kind of guy. Definitely knows how to get to the quarterback. When you watch this kid play, though, he's a different kind of guy. Chase Young is a different kind of animal. He is absolutely positively ferocious. He's a high energy guy. 7.5 sacks this year, but I mean, if you watched him play, I watched a few Redskin games, like pretty close in detail. He missed a few sacks that he'll learn to finish up on. It's kind of like Bud Dupree for Pittsburgh. For the first 2 or 3 years in Pittsburgh, Bud Dupree must have missed 20 sacks in 3 years. And then he started figuring out how to finish those sacks. And Chase Young's probably going to figure it out faster than Dupree. And this year, defensive rookie of the year. Next year, I think this kid's going to be the conversation for defensive player of the year if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, without a doubt. I agree with that. There were some coverages that he missed. There are some sacks that just went by him. And I guess with more coaching and with more experience, he will only get better.
Sure, absolutely. Let's talk about your actual defensive player of the year. I know who I think is the defensive player of the year, but I don't know if you agree with me. So let's hear it. Defensive player of the year for What's on Sports.
Okay, so backstory for this guy. His motivation was the 3 defensive player of the year awards that his older brother has. So whenever they have Zoom conversations, he would always see that. And that was his burning desire to get one. And there's
Yes.
no doubt, head and shoulders, he is the best defensive player of the year. It's not Aaron Donald, it's TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So check his stats for this season: 15 sacks. And I guess just like Chase Young, there are some sacks that just went by him or he just missed. And he also registered 41 quarterback hits. So if only he got there a second earlier, so he could have gotten more sacks than 15. And he was
Yeah.
just a stalwart in the D line of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and one of the bigger reasons why they are the top ranked defense in the NFL, and why are they in the playoffs.
Yeah, so he plays for a defense that led the league in sacks. He plays for a defense that led the league in interceptions, which a lot of that is based off of the pressure that they get on the quarterback. If you watch Pittsburgh at all, which I, as a Pittsburgh fan, I've watched every game, they did drop TJ into coverage a lot more this year than they did in the past. So I didn't feel that he was quite the terror as a pass rusher as he was last year, but he was definitely a force in other parts of the game. So I can't argue with the TJ Watt Defensive Player of the Year award. I would just say Aaron Donald was extremely impressive. The Rams have been very, very good. So it is a little difficult for me to pick between the two. As a homer, as a guy who loves the Steelers, I can't argue with TJ Watt, though. I really like it. Let's flip over to the other side of the ball. Let's talk about your offensive rookie of the year. And I think I know who that's going to be as well.
Okay, so it's a tough decision, but I'd rather give it to two people, to two players. So
Oh,
one is
you're
a
going to cop
quarterback.
out. You're going to cop out.
One is a quarterback, one is a wide receiver.
Yeah, I know what you're going to do.
They're both great in their own right. That's why I'd rather have in co-offensive rookies of the year for this season. So quarterback, Justin Herbert, and of course, wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. So they are two Justins, and they're both deserving of the award. Justin Herbert, just a sensation coming off of Oregon, and nobody took notice of him early, but he started gaining 300-yard passing games and started to get steady, starting to get comfortable in the NFL. And then eventually he's now one of the brighter stars at quarterback in the league. And of course,
Absolutely.
Justin Jefferson broke Randy Moss' reception record as a rookie in the Vikings franchise. And it's just fascinating that even though the Vikings traded away Stephon Diggs, they got equal, if not a greater talent in Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I almost equal production. And that's where we talked about that in the last segment, which I thought was a good segue into this segment. Almost equal production from Justin Jefferson. It's really hard to overlook what he did, especially when you start saying things like he beat Randy Moss's rookie record. I mean, that in itself is just, well worth the conversation. But in my opinion, I think you got to go with the quarterback. And I know what you did. I understand why you couldn't go either way. In my opinion, I think the quarterback always wins the award, but I can't argue with what you did. Let's talk about Offensive Player of the Year.
Okay, so just like you mentioned a while ago, there are only 7 people before him who reached this distinction, this milestone. And hands down, Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans, who I believe is the heart and soul of the Tennessee offense. No disrespect to Ryan Tannehill, but he's the one who is anchoring Tennessee's play action attack. If not for him, without him, their play action attack wouldn't be as effective as it is to receivers like A.J. Brown or Jonnu Smith. So he reached 2,000 yards. He needed 223 in the last game in week 17 to reach 2,000. He had 250 with 2 touchdowns. He had 2 games this season of 200-plus yards rushing. And he also won the rushing triple crown, for he led the league in rushing attempts, and he also led the league in rushing touchdowns, aside from yardage. So when it comes to offense, he really is the fulcrum and the nucleus of the Tennessee Titans, and it's just so right for us to award him the Offensive Player of the Year, Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I would find a lot of trouble arguing with that, just for the simple fact that when you look at Derrick Henry, he just wears you down. I mean, that guy will just wear a defense down. If you watch the last game just this Sunday against the Titans, against the Texans, he just wore them down. At some point, that defense just gave up, and they were like, wow, we can't stop this guy. We cannot stop this guy. So I cannot argue with that. He's all the running backs that have gotten this goes without saying. This has gone without saying. all the running backs that have gotten paid and failed after getting paid, and this guy gets paid his big contract and comes out with his best year ever. Bravo to him. Bravo to him. Other running backs should be loving the fact that he just did this because they're going to make sure they get paid as well.
Yeah, definitely earned his keep. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's go to the two things that I'm most interested in right now. Let's talk about our MVP for the year. Who's the MVP for the entire NFL?
Okay, so this guy solidified the award in week 16 when his rival, or his biggest rival for the award, played a so-so game, and he torched his opponent, the Titans, of all teams, with 3 touchdowns and 200 plus yards. And hands down, it's Aaron Rodgers of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
Imagine they have more passing touchdowns than punts. And that stat alone gives you a strong case for Aaron Rodgers as most valuable player. He wouldn't let his offense march out of the field and take a punt. So they'd rather continue to drive and continue to find their receivers or continue to drive the ball on the ground. So they have talented players all around. They have Devante Adams, they have Aaron Jones, and they have this big tight end in Runyon, who is emerging as one of the better players in the league. But if not for Aaron Rodgers, those people wouldn't be who they are or wouldn't get the stats that they have right now. So 48 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions for Aaron Rodgers. So imagine that touchdown interception ratio for Aaron Rodgers. So without question, head and shoulders, Aaron Rodgers will win and should win his 3rd NFL MVP this season.
Yeah, that would be amazing, actually, and that'll put him in the conversation, in my opinion, as one of the best quarterbacks of all time. It's really difficult to argue how great Aaron Rodgers is, and as much as people want to say Patrick Mahomes should be the MVP, I gotta say I don't think Patrick Mahomes is in that conversation anymore. I think Patrick Mahomes has exited the conversation. I think it's a 2-man race. I think it's Derrick Henry, and I think it's Aaron Rodgers. And again, going back to what I said before, the quarterback will always win if it comes down to something like that. So let's talk about our final category, and this is one that's often overlooked but shouldn't be. I want to know who you think the coach of the year is going to be.
Actually, it's an easy choice for me about weighing all the coaches that we've had this season. And sadly, he won't be able to coach his team during the wild card round. And it's Kevin Stefanski of the Cleveland Browns. So he basically inherited roughly the same team from Freddie Kitchens last season. There were some adjustments here and there, but roughly it is the same team. It's the same nucleus. And look at what he did. From 5 wins, they now have 10. Now they have double-digit wins this season, and they have made the playoffs for the first time, the Browns, in 18 seasons. So those distinctions alone should make Kevin Stefanski the rightful selection for Coach of the Year.
You know, I would have made an argument that Brian Flores should be in this conversation. I thought Brian Flores did a great job with the Dolphins until that final game meltdown. Stefanski, you know, you bring the Cleveland Browns into the playoffs for the first time in 18 years with a team that's pretty talented, but in a division that's extremely tough, in a conference that isn't easy, with a schedule that wasn't quite that easy. You did lose to the Jets. You did end up getting COVID. Now you can't coach your first playoff game. I guess I'll go with it. Stefanski's done some good things this year, and I think he's built a solid foundation moving into the future, which to me is probably the most important thing for the Browns. Great job on this, Lance. Really great job.
You had to bring the drum roll.
I had to bring the drum roll in for you. Boom. So I'm going to keep you on for one more segment. I got something in my eye here. Sorry about that. I'm going to keep you on for one more segment. We're going to talk about something. We're going to do something that's called First Reaction. So we're going to bring up the teams that are playing this weekend in the, what is it, Super Wild Card Weekend? Is that what we're calling it?
Like the Super Hyper Wild Card Weekend. I guess that's
Super Hyper Wild Card Weekend. So we're going to talk about these teams. We're going to talk about these games. We're not going to tell people who we think is going to win. We'll do that on the Friday show. What we're going to do today is we're just going to say our first reaction when we hear about these games. Keep it to a sentence or two. You give a reaction. I'll give a reaction, something you're looking forward to seeing in this game. Let's start with the Los Angeles Rams versus the Seattle Seahawks. First reaction.
Okay, so first thing that comes into mind are two questionable quarterbacks. So John Wolford got his first start in Week 17 against the Cardinals. He did fairly well, but and led the Rams to victory, but much is left to be desired as well. And of course, we all know all the struggles that Russell Wilson had all season long, especially during the middle of the regular season. So it remains to be seen if the good Russell Wilson or the bad Russell Wilson will come out in this wild card game.
Yeah, my first reaction to this is that I think this is a great test to find out how good that Rams defense is.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle can put points up on the board. They definitely have offensive weapons. People have been talking about the evolution of that Rams defense for the back half of the NFL season, saying how good they are. So for me, my first reaction is I want to see how good that Rams defense is. And if they can take it and really take it to Seattle, they could be someone you have to deal with a little bit more in the playoffs. Let's talk about the 8-8 Chicago Bears going against the New Orleans Saints led by Drew Brees. First reaction.
First reaction is two players, actually. So David Montgomery and Allen Robinson. How good will they be against the Saints? And I guess they'll be the catalyst if ever the Bears will pull off an upset against the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, for me, it's all about the quarterbacks. I'm just thinking quarterbacks. Mitchell Trubisky's come on fantastically over the last 4 weeks of the season. Like out of nowhere, all of a sudden the kid can play football again. And then you've got Drew Brees, who very well could be playing his very last football game every time he steps on the field from this point forward. So there are two stories to be told here, but for me, it's all about the quarterbacks. Last game for the NFC lineup, we're talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the Washington football team. First reaction.
So my only reaction to this game is one question. Will Chase Young get to Tom Brady? Or will the Washington football team's defense affect the offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
So my first reaction to this is I told you so. I've been telling people about Washington all year long. Now, the only thing that might slow Washington down is the fact that Alex Smith might not be able to play. I just heard Ron Rivera say that he may switch between Alex Smith and another quarterback and rotate them throughout the game, which would be awful. If Alex Smith can play a full game here and he's healthy enough to be the Alex Smith that we've seen all year long, I think that Tampa Bay could be in trouble. And I know Tampa Bay's been really, really hot right now. So what I'm saying is not a popular opinion. But the Redskins have a defense, and they've got a front four. They can rush with four people, which is the key in the NFL. You can rush with four people and torture a guy like Tom Brady who's not mobile and can't get out of the way. I think Tampa could be in some real, real trouble. That's our first reaction for the NFC games. Let's talk about these AFC games now. Let's start with my beloved Pittsburgh Steelers against the Cleveland Browns. First reaction.
First reaction would be Kevin Stefanski, how his absence will affect the coaching with the Cleveland Browns. Of course, their offensive coordinator, Van Pelt, will still be in the sidelines, but play calling might not be the same with him at the helm. And could we see Baker Mayfield calling his own plays on the turf?
Yeah, my first reaction to this is I want to see which Ben Roethlisberger comes out to play. If it's the Ben Roethlisberger that played the second half of the Colts game and played the beginning part of the season, the Steelers could be someone to reckon with in the playoffs. They've obviously got a defense, even though they're going to be missing their top cornerback this week because he's out. Joe Hayden's out with COVID as well. But if he can come out and play and stretch the field, Cleveland's very susceptible down the middle of the field. Their safeties aren't that good. Only one of their corners is good. Pittsburgh's loaded at wide receiver when they can catch the ball. I think that if Ben Roethlisberger comes out and stretches the field, this entire discussion for the playoffs becomes a completely different one. That's my first reaction. First reaction to the Indianapolis Colts versus the Buffalo Bills.
One word, shootout. You got two of the better gunslingers in the league in Phillip Rivers and Josh Allen. So it wouldn't be a struggle for them to reach 300 yards in this game. And I see the score going up to the high 30s for both teams.
So my first reaction is I wonder how good the Buffalo defense is. The Buffalo defense has really come along a long way over the last half of the season, more or less the last 6 games of the season, completely changing their metrics from being like the 27th ranked defense to like the 15th ranked defense. So I'd really like to see what's going to happen as we see which team hits the field. Now, obviously, Buffalo can score, but my first reaction is, can they stop anybody? Well, you're right. Phillip Rivers will come out slinging and throwing, and Indianapolis can actually run the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see if Buffalo can slow them down or stop them. Now, speaking of running the ball, our last game that we're going to have a first reaction to, the Baltimore Ravens versus the Tennessee Titans. First reaction.
Yeah, funny you allude to it. So 3 words, ground and pound. So you have Derrick Henry on one side, and then you have J.K. Dobbins and Lamar Jackson on the other. So it's poises to be a good battle on the ground. And let's see who wins the ground game.
Yeah, so my first reaction to this is how many points are they going to score? Tennessee does not have a good defense. Hasn't had a good defense all year long. They've tried to plug holes, but it's been very difficult for them. They make some key stops, which is obviously how they win games, but their defense isn't that good. And Baltimore's defense started out as one of the better secondaries in football at the beginning of the year, and right now they can't stop anybody. Their secondary is not very good, and they've not been able to stop the run very well. They've just been outscoring people, and in the back half of the season, they didn't have a very strong schedule. So they've come a long way offensively, but their defense is not very strong. So this is going to be 2 teams that can't seem to stop the run, trying to play against other teams that can run the hell out of the ball. My first reaction is this is going to be a shootout. His name is Lance Fernandez. He is the head writer over on What's on Sports, and he came on today to the podcast to help us out. Lance, you were great today. Love the haircut. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, John. You can always bet on it.
Love that guy. So good. So good. Really good. All right. On the show, we always invite you guys to go over to our website, check out the articles. And of course, there's always something you can do over there, which is called the mailbag. So I invite you guys to leave your comments in the mailbag, leave your questions in the mailbag, and we'll do our best to answer those questions on this show. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you that our show is powered by and sponsored by our friends over at Sports Trading Systems. It's sportstradingsystems.com. You can go over there today and you can learn how to use back-tested algorithms and information and lots of good stuff over there. Go over and learn how to use the data that the sports trading system has harvested and learn how to trade sports like other people trade stocks. It's an investment system like none other on the planet Earth. It's making tons of people tons of money. Go over to Sports Trading Systems today and check out what they have to offer. Now, let's jump into what we're talking about. I was talking about the mailbag. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to answer all of your questions. If you'd like to leave a question for us, go over to whatsonsports.com, look for the mailbag, and leave a question for the show today. First question. It was reported that some Eagles players were upset with head coach Doug Peterson when they pulled out Jalen Hurts against Washington. Can the relationship between the coach and his players be repaired? So listen, I've read a couple different things. One of the things that I read that has been corroborated by some of the NFL insiders is that some of the players were so angry that they wanted to physically confront Peterson. Now, anytime you get a player angry enough that he wants to go over and get in the face of a coach, possibly put his hands on a coach, it's going to be tough to win the confidence of that player back. One of the things that a player needs to know, one of the things that anybody needs to know when they deal with their boss is that the boss is going to be honest with them. So, for example, if I have an employee and I don't think the employee is doing a good job, I will tell the employee along the way the things the employee needs to improve on. The employee can't act surprised if he sees later on that I wrote in a report that I was saying that he wasn't doing things the way he should be doing them, because I told the employee along the way that some of the things that he was doing were not up to par, and some of the things that he needed to learn, he wasn't learning. So if somebody sees me write it down, they'll know that I was honest with them in the beginning, and the reaction should be a professional one. The same thing happens on an NFL football team. If a coach tells you, we're going to try to win this game, and then pulls out their starting quarterback, who's been playing pretty well throughout the year, and puts in the third string guy because he says, well, he worked hard this year and he should get some reps. The team was upset, obviously upset, and deservedly upset. So can they repair this? I don't know. I don't know if that's possible to repair a relationship like this. I wish him well, though. I've had situations where people have thought that I lied to him or was dishonest with them, and it was hard to repair those relationships. Let's go to our next question. Do you think Matthew Stafford has played his last game in Detroit? If yes, where do you think he will play next season? I don't know that Detroit has a better opportunity right now than to play Matthew Stafford. Stafford most likely owns a home there. Stafford most likely has spent the last 10 years of his life there. That is home to him. It's not easy to pick up and leave, even though the Detroit Lions have zero chance of winning a Super Bowl in the next 5 years. And you could write that down. Stafford would probably only leave if given an opportunity to join a contender. So let's say Indianapolis is looking for a quarterback and Stafford fits in. He may go there. Let's say Drew Brees retires and the Saints decide, hey, we'd love to have you down here. He may go there. He may take an opportunity with Bill Belichick if it's offered, but I don't think it will be. So will Matt Stafford stay in Detroit? I think right now it's 50-50. I think the choice will be Stafford's at the end, and I think it'll be very tough for Stafford to take his wife and his family and move them anywhere if they're comfortable inside the city of Detroit. It's not easy to sell an $8 million home or however expensive his home is in a market like this right now. So I don't necessarily think it's as easy as people think it is, thinking he's just going to go and that's it. You just don't know. There are a lot of factors in place. Again, let's take it out of football and bring it into real life. How easy would it be for me to leave my life where I am right now because someone else offered me a job that paid me more money than this one or the same amount as this one? I don't think I would do it. I don't think I would take the opportunity unless it was one that could maybe put a ring on my finger, and then it's something we could talk about. Last question coming out of our mailbag. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are an appealing dark horse in the NFC. Do you think they will be the first team to play a Super Bowl in their home turf? The opportunities are there. Tampa has looked incredibly well over the last 3 weeks of the season. The offense is really, really clicking. The defense is fast. They get to the quarterback. They blitz the heck out of quarterbacks and rattle people. Their secondary is not bad. They've got an experienced coach. Do they have a chance? Yes, they do. But I think their biggest obstacle right now is in the first round. If Alex Smith plays, and I've said this earlier in the show, if Alex Smith plays and for the Washington football team, that is going to be a tough out for them. If they can make it through Washington and not take a brutal beating from that pass rush and go on to round two, Tampa Bay could be a very, very scary team. For me, I look at that team and I think it's all about confidence. That team has to get their confidence, has to get their sea legs underneath them. And if they can do it with, like, let's just say a really convincing win against Washington, then I think that a lot of people are going to be really, really worried about Tampa. And there's two words that make you worry more than anything else. Tom Brady. Because that guy's a winner. That makes people afraid. That was the mailbag. Thank you so much for joining us today on the What's on Sports podcast. My name is John Tedora, promising to bring you some of the best in sports podcast content. And I'm going to make another promise to you. If you listen to the show on Friday, we'll be giving away free picks for the weekend. Free picks for the weekend. We have had an amazing season guiding people to make a lot of money. Stick around for Friday's show. It's going to be great. Coming at you live, 10:30, Facebook, YouTube, or downloaded on your favorite podcast platforms. It's whatsonsports.com. I'm out of here.